Communication is one of those things, John, that when you say that word, everybody kind of has a different image of that, right? Some people think, well, it's just what you say. Some people think it's, the way that you say it, etc. But in general, everything about walking into a practice is communicating something to the person who walks in. So they walk in the practice. The first communication is the person sitting that they first greet. And what is that like? Okay. Um, it's about making sure that the message and the tone and the tenor of what you want to communicate comes across. So, in all of communication, let me talk about just communication in general. In all of communication, it's way more than the words that we use, it's the style in which we speak, it's the tone and the tenor in which we do that, and it's the context, right?
What's going on, everybody? My name is John Stamper, host of the Beyond the Operatory podcast, brought to you by Dental City. Very excited to continue this with Betsy Mitchell. In our first episode, we talked about leadership and managing teams, and was very fascinated. And we're going to continue to do this to bring your experience with the Green Bay Packer organization from a team perspective and relate that to a dental practice. You also have done so many great things in your career. So I think throughout these episodes, we're going to talk about them as well. But the football analogies are fun and they're relatable in those instances. All right. So this next episode is about communication and emotional intelligence. And I think where I wanted to start is because, as you know so well, every personality in a dental practice is different. I think that's what makes each dental practice unique. There's a lot of things, as you know, that a dental practice will do to make themselves unique, to stand out, right? Especially as there are more and more dental practices on corners of every city. But let's call it like it is, Betsy. What makes that dental practice unique are their personality styles. But talk a little bit about the importance of how to do communication with all of those different personality styles.
Communication is one of those things, John, that when you say that word, everybody kind of has a different image of that, right? Some people think, well, it's just what you say. Some people think it's, the way that you say it, etc. But in general, everything about walking into a practice is communicating something to the person who walks in. So they walk in the practice. The first communication is the person sitting that they first greet. And what is that like? Okay. Um, it's about making sure that the message and the tone and the tenor of what you want to communicate comes across. So in all of communication, let me talk about just communication in general. In all of communication, it's way more than the words that we use. It's the style in which we speak, it's the tone and the tenor in which we do that, and it's the context, right? So in the whole notion of communication, we're talking about layers of that. People coming into a practice are expecting a certain level of communication. I'm not expecting a big, long uh, discourse with someone when I walk in, but I'm expecting to be heard. I'm expecting to, be viewed and treated with respect, etc. So that's the first layer. The second layer is what happens when you're actually going to have a conversation with someone. Well, in a conversation, let's take patient to hygienist, for example, there's the opportunity for clarity. There's the opportunity for an openness for people to ask questions. There's the opportunity for people to express a desire. There are all those pieces. And that only happens when there's an openness between people that says, okay, tell me about yourself. Tell me what's going on. The invitation to hear. Communication is much more than what is being said. It's also what is being heard. And listening with what we kind of in the psychobabble world used to call the third ear. Listening for what isn't said is as important many times as what is said. And therefore, when you're dealing with anybody that's either a coworker, your boss, the dentist, the hygienist, the patient, you're always wanting to pay attention to not only the words that are spoken, but the spaces between them, the silences, because they speak very loudly, and the things that aren't spoken. So the other parts that we communicate with. I communicate with my hands. You could tell, right? I should probably keep them quiet. I communicate with my hands. I communicate with my body. I communicate with my face. I'm communicating all kinds of things all the time. The question for each of us to ask is, as we're listening to someone, as we're communicating someone, we are also communicating with someone, we are also sending a message back. So by posing a question, I'm sending a message that says, I'm interested in you. By listening to the answer, I'm sending a message that says, I care what you say. By posing a comfortable space for people to have that context, I'm saying to them, it makes a difference to me. It matters to me how you feel while you're here in this space. That's universal. That's in every conversation we have with every person. The key elements of that communication are, am I hearing what's being said? Am I clear about what's being said? Am I clearly responding to what's being said? We only communicate when we have a need or desire for something. And it might be my need or desire is to simply be heard. Or it might be that I'm in intense pain and I have a real need to say, I need help, right? It could be any degree of anything. In the middle of that, how we respond is going to have a very huge impact on what is the feeling that that person is left with. End of the day, really effective communication is both people feeling that they were heard, that they were understood, and that something is going to happen. We don't know what that would be. It depends upon the problem, but something's going to happen. It's absolutely essential, and it's the thing we talk about the most, and it's the thing that, in general, we really don't do the best.
So the second part of this title of this episode was communication and emotional intelligence. And as I'm hearing you talk about the importance of, the second that a patient walks in, there's the element of how each of the team members communicate, but fold in emotional intelligence into that. Like this awareness that with practice, I know can get better over time, but how important it is to be able to read how to communicate, right? Because as you know so well, we're all different. We all have different communication styles. Hearing you talk about what you talked about, I think about a practice that is a real go-go practice. And I've heard people say over the years, we don't want to get into the small talk. We want patients to come in. They don't want to be here. We want to kind of get them in and out. But isn't that an element of also the emotional intelligence piece of understanding or a practice, knowing that some patient may want to have a conversation and some may not?
It's a really important piece because it means that you, as the person who's trying to make a connection here, need to be aware and observing. And when people are busy, if you ever walk into a place and somebody's busy on a computer, they don't even look at you. They say, "What do you need? Oh, you're here." They never make eye contact. If you're not feeling that anybody looks at you, you don't feel connected. And that may work for some people who are on fast forward and just want to get in and get out, but it doesn't work for everybody. At the end of the day, you have to give the opportunity for someone to connect with you. So, number one, observe. That's a key. Emotional intelligence is based on observation. It's what do I see that I can respond to or react to. If you think about how do you make decisions about what you're going to do, an awful lot of our decisions are made on our observation of, is there an urgent issue going on here? Is the person frazzled? Are we seeing that they're a little old lady that's showing up that can't, she get her walker in the door and she's kind of trying to, whatever. I could have used a little old man, probably better. But you look at that and you go, so how do I, as a person who's in that practice, read the person that's coming in? And not only that, how do I read my coworkers? How do I read my dentist on that day? How do I read the people around me? Emotional intelligence is something that some people are born with a very high level of this, where it's just sort of automatic. I can look at you and I know almost instantly what I can tell. Your body language, you're nodding, you're engaged, we've got eye contact going on. that could be sort of an inborn, ability, and it also can be learned, not to the same degree as somebody who is dotted, automatically. We kind of inherited that, but people can learn to pay attention, and it comes down to observing and taking the moment that it takes to ask yourself the question, What am I reading here? What am I seeing with this person?" That will affect how you're going to interact. That will affect, what am I going to say or do? What's the pace of what I'm going to do? What's the urgency that I sense here? Is there someone that I'm going to say, "Hey, can I offer you a glass of water? Can I offer you something?" That a caring gesture with someone who may be very, very upset. It plays a really big role. It plays a very big role because everything that we do has to do with people. And in the people world, we're looking at, how do I interact with whomever I come across? And whether that's in a grocery store, or whether that's, in a hallway, whether that's in an elevator with somebody, I need to be paying attention to not only what's happening with them, but how am I also coming across? If I'm having a bad day, I need to be paying attention to the fact that, boy, do I really want to show that in this setting? Maybe not.
All right, so the next thing I want to talk about in regards to communication is providing constructive feedback and doing the best that you can, to minimize defensiveness. We're going to slip back into the sports world again. As a big sports fan myself, I'm always watching when a player comes off the field and didn't do what they should have done, and that interaction that the camera captures sometime of a coach at that moment in real time on national TV, having that stern conversation with that athlete. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about a way to communicate in a dental practice where you can create an environment where you can give constructive feedback, but to prevent that, defensiveness.
You know, Constructive feedback is actually a gift. And it's a gift because if you're not aware of something that you're doing that's creating a problem, you'll never change it. The only way that I know that is if someone says to me, "Betsy, are you aware when you do this, this is what I see happen?" Right? I might not like that, but I also may not know it and I can't change it. So start with the context that feedback is a gift. It's constructive feedback is important. Where you give the feedback and how you give the feedback is crucial. So, feedback that may be difficult for someone to hear needs to be given in a setting that is either private or contained, not in an emotional way, but in a way that says, "I want to offer you some feedback. It may be hard for you to hear this, but it's important for us to talk about it." And so you frame it. I always talk about bookending messages. And by bookending, what I mean is you start a difficult conversation. Now, sometimes constructive feedback can be very difficult. So you start the conversation saying, "Look, it's important for you to understand. I really want us to have a conversation, and I want to share something important with you. I value you and I appreciate you." You give the message, and at the end, you close it with, "Will, I really want you to know that this is important for us to work on. I'm willing to do this. It might have been difficult for you to hear, but I care about you, I value you, and I'm sharing this with you because of that." And so that you bookend the conversation so they can hear the middle, because the middle is where you want to change. And with any situation in the sports world, it doesn't necessarily happen that way. That's the heat of the emotion. You see a player coming off the field, and it's emotional, and there's the heat, and they're getting it right. And by the way, they're paid for that. Where for the rest of the world, it's a whole different thing.
Of course.
Because in the other parts of the sports business, it doesn't happen that way. So in my role with the Green Bay Packers, when we were giving feedback, it was given very much in a different milieu, in the framework that says, "I want us to get to a place where you can see that this is either helpful or doesn't help us, and we're trying to get to the same goal." I think it's hard for people at times to hear constructive feedback because we will take it as a criticism. And if you frame it in the beginning saying, I'm offering this to you in an effort for us to get on the same page, for us to be helpful, to kind of get to where we need to go with this. I appreciate you, I value you, and here's something that I think you may not be aware of, and I'd like to share it with you. So it's that style
Yeah.
in sharing the feedback that will get you the best result. The minute someone gets defensive, and they almost always do, and we do, that's a normal thing. The minute that happens, it's helpful for the person who's giving the feedback to say, I can see that this is hard for you to hear. Shall we continue now, or should we take this up again maybe later? So offering an option rather than getting too far down the road where the emotions go wild and you get too far from the point. It's always helpful to offer someone who's starting to get really defensive an escape so that they can think about it and you can come back and circle back later. They always say, cooler heads prevail over time. And there's a lot of truth to that. So sometimes time can be a really big helpful factor in offering that kind of feedback.
So I love the bookend piece of it. And by the way, if you're listening to this, there's a lot of nuggets that Betsy just shared. Like, this is probably a good time to pause the video or the podcast and write some notes. That was really good information. In conjunction with that, let's talk a little bit about the importance of leading with empathy and trust in this communication piece of it.
You know, as a person, as a leader, in any situation, but certainly as a leader, it's really key for you to be able to understand your people and understand how to connect with them. Trust is built on a relationship. It doesn't occur without a relationship. And so thinking about each person, everybody has a different uh, way of communicating, and they have different needs. So as a leader, you may have, let's say, 10 people in your office that you're going to have some influence over, that you are leading, okay? Of those 10 people, they each one may have a slightly different way that they respond. They each one have a different set of needs. They each one have a different motivator, right? It's your role as a leader to understand each person and to take the time to try to figure out, how do I best connect with that person to engage them? Because the engagement is what you want. When you have really engaged people, you have high retention. And replacing people in an office is very, very expensive. And it's also very disruptive to an office set. So you really want to look at engagement. So with each person, it's to say, okay, I know this person, um, they they respond best with this kind of feedback. This person responds best with this type of support, and tuning into that. And the other piece is, while you're trying to figure that out, it's helpful to ask people. You know, I've even said many times with people that I've had to lead, what kind of leadership style works best for you? How can I best support you? Posing those questions can be helpful, because that person then has the opportunity to say, well, I really like to just kind of do my own thing. And if you see something, please bring it to me. And then Otherwise, there are times we have to guess, and guessing doesn't work that well.
So I think a great way to bookend this episode, because I think your whole conversation around trust and the importance of it, I think a lot of these tools and tactics and all these things are important, but you keep coming back to this, the importance of trust, the importance of relationship and empathy and all of that. My last question for you for this episode is the importance of creating, psychologically safe environment in the practice. Because as you know so well, you can have all the best intentions to really take your communication to the next level if the people in the practice don't feel psychologically safe. So maybe it's a great way to kind of end this episode.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful way to end it, because that sense of safety is what allows people to relax and to give their best. We do not do well when we're operating in an anxious environment. And the whole sense of safety is about people feeling as though it's okay for them to pose questions. It's okay for them to being who they're going to be. that we started talking a little bit about that notion of differences, and people bring different things to the table. The differences in a team or in an office are the things that actually strengthen that office. So acknowledging and appreciating the differences are very, very important in safety. Um, Understanding that anyone that brings up an idea, anyone that comes that's operating from a different framework, that there's safety in being who they are, and that the differences matter. We don't want everyone to be the same. If that happens, you lose all of the innovation that could be coming through, and you lose all the ability to be a very, very high performing team. The leader, in terms of creating that safety, needs to be open to different ideas. They need to be open to the fact that people will challenge you and appreciate and welcome challenges. Rather than that closed off, don't ask me any questions, don't tell me anything that I don't want to know, right? So that's that whole notion of saying we invite you to offer ideas. We invite you to give us feedback. We invite you to make suggestions. And in that invitation, there is that sense that it's okay. And that's how you will feel the safe. That, and when they are also well taken care of in terms of what's the environment that they're working in, is that physically a safe environment? Are their needs as employees or people working in the environment being met? Are there things that can improve the overall environment, the tone, the tenor of when you're in that setting? And I think the biggest word is respect. At the end of the day, if you're not respectful in how you receive communication, if you're not respectful in the way that you give communication, if you tolerate disrespect in a setting, that will never be a safe setting. That is crucial. And it needs to be a constant, unwavering.
Another great episode.
Yeah.
I want to let all of you know that are listening to this, as you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify. I'd love to have you, subscribe to the podcast. And same thing if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. And that way, each time we put out a new episode, you'll be notified on your listening device of choice. The next episode, which you're going to see that I'm going to do with Betsy, is going to be on practice culture. So episode 1, we laid the groundwork with leadership, managing teams. In this one, we talk a little bit about communication, emotional intelligence, and I'm excited to get into a little bit of culture and get your input on that. So thanks as always.
Thank you, Don.
And thanks for listening, everybody.